It's an absolute pleasure to be here at American University Museum. I think you'll all agree the exhibition was absolutely spectacular here. And I will tell you, who here are Washingtonians? Most of you. I tell you, you're very, very lucky to have an institution like this that is so prepared to do interesting shows and think so globally about contemporary art. My name is Skerritt. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Art at the University of Virginia. And I was part of the curatorial team that worked on this exhibition. And in order to begin, I would like to pay my respects to the Piscataway, the Anacostia, and the Pamunkey, who are the traditional owners of this land that we are gathered. And in doing that, I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and recognise that this place that we are gathered in, which has had this museum since 2005, was in fact the land that belonged to the Anacostia, Pamunkey, and Piscataway, and they have stewarded it for tens of thousands of years. Neil, great to see you. Neil Greentree is the man responsible for making all the bark paintings bounce off the page. He's a photographer. Very excellent job keeping the catalogue, which is available downstairs for the very reasonable price of $55. So what I wanted to get us started with today was to talk about why this exhibition is important and how it came to be here at American University. And that story begins on a balmy October evening, 2015, when I was a PhD student at the University of Pittsburgh, and I had driven to Charlottesville, Virginia, to catch up with two dear friends of mine, Jamua Marawili, who I just silenced, and Hayden McDonald. And Jamua had an exhibition opening at the Yirrkala Aboriginal Art Collection at the University of Virginia. And it was a great success. And we all had that great adrenaline of having just opened an exhibition. And we, as you do, popped down to the pub. And the pub, in fact, was the Three Notch Brewery in Charlottesville, which is now obviously very historic for this moment. And we were sitting around, and Jamua had spent the week looking at historic bark paintings in the Yolŋu collection. And he had had no idea prior to coming to his residency that there were so many of these works in America. Works that he had done as a young man, works that his father had done, works that his relatives had done. And he was quite philosophical that evening. And he said to us, he said, you know what we really need? We need an exhibition that will tell the whole story of the Yirrkala from Yirrkala, just from their region. Now, when Jamua tells you to do something, you kind of have to do it. But Kate and I immediately knew that if we were going to do that, if we couldn't go and do an exhibition, what would that mean? You know, we're like two white dudes from Australia. It had to be led by Jamua, and we put that to Jamua. We're happy to work with you, but this has to be your exhibition. And Jamua made the point that really it wasn't going to be his exhibition either, because according to the Yolŋu system, every person is connected to every other person, and they all have these reciprocal obligations. And so the task for us became working with Jamua and then the late Mr. Wannabe. I will say his name. Over here, we'll say Mr. Walker Wannabe, who passed away in May. And over the next 8 years, we travelled with Mr. Wannabe to America. We went back to Australia to sit with the clan leaders and say, what does an exhibition that tells this whole story look like? And so, over those 8 years, this exhibition started to take shape. And so what we see here is this result of this community of people coming together and producing something that really is to present their story to the world. It's a very powerful story, and a story that, as Mr. Wonderly says in the introduction text, the designs go back thousands of years, but this story is a story about all those designs, but it's also a story about Yolŋu putting those designs out into the world and sharing, bringing their power to the world. As part of that, it was very, very important to Djambawa that the exhibition include all of the contemporary practitioners. As much as he was concerned that the whole story had all of the old people who went before him, it also had to have the young emerging leaders, including himself. And as a sort of a testament to that, Djambawa painted a very extraordinary painting for this exhibition, which is behind you here. And the painting is called Journey to America. And what Djambawa has painted in this extraordinary painting, at the base, if you can kind of see it, there is an ancestral crocodile named Baru. Now, Baru was sitting by the beach with his wife having a meal. They had a little bit of a fight, and he went to bed. He was angry, she was angry. You should never go to bed angry with your partner, because his wife set fire to his hut. And Baru came running out, and three incredible things happened. And the first thing was he dives into the waters of that place called Yirrkala. As he emerges, his body is scarred with the diamonds of fire, and he becomes a crocodile. And the crocodile stands up, throws those fires into the water at Yirrkala, and this sacred fire travels to other clans. And in this painting, Djambawa has painted Baru at the bottom, the ancestral crocodile that he would say is him. He is the embodiment of Baru, throwing that fire into the waters and travelling over the seas, across the world, and ending at, well, the Statue of Liberty. Right? What a magnificent idea. Baru holding up his fire, Lady Liberty holding up her fire, and as Djambawa says, putting these two laws on the same level. And it's this incredible gesture here of sharing, bringing his power to you. Okay, that's my pre-map. I am joined today by an extraordinary group of people who have all played a role in this exhibition, all being part of the 8-year journey. Kate McDonald, who's the CEO of Agency Projects in Melbourne, and former arts coordinator at the Western Centre at Yirrkala. Dave Wickens, current arts coordinator at the Yolŋu in Yirrkala, somebody who worked very hard with the artists on the newly commissioned works in this exhibition, and Dr. Mađayin, who is the curator of Oceanic Art at the Metropolitan Museum. We travelled with Mr. Wonderly and Kate and I to several of the communities when we were interviewing artists for the exhibition. Okay, Kate, what did I miss out about in that? What did I miss in that introduction? What do you remember about that evening in Charlottesville? Why do you think Djambawa asked us to do this, take this journey?
I mean, it's a bit of, is this what? Just passing it around. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us in this extraordinary space that is surrounded by families, identities, people coming together as a relationship. And I think, to answer your question, I think it was a profound moment when we saw Djambawa open the drawers of the Kluge and see these these ancestors, these relationships that he was pulling out of the drawers there, and acknowledging that they had a power in them, they had a presence, they were something that was still living, there was something that, as he said, that needed to be awakened. And that awakening can happen through joining those relationships through the commissions and filling the gaps of that kinship, that cycle of a relationship with a family. But also through the songs. Jambua, in many occasions throughout the development of this exhibition, would sing the song lines of these words. And in fact, every elder that we spoke to across Arnhem Land sung these patterns to life, every step of the way. And for those that might have been here the other night, they almost sang this exhibition singing the life back into these words, singing the patterns and the designs. I think for context, of those that don't know, Arnhem Land and that travelling across Arnhem Land that we did for 8 years is a very vast space. Hours between each community, very remote, beautiful part of the world. But in traversing all that landscape, we were travelling across these patterns and designs, these sacred places, and being invited to go to these places and talk about these words, and talk about these ancestors and the relationships, and understand what gaps have to be filled. So I think Jambua was 4 steps ahead of us. He knew exactly what needed to happen before he even had that beer with us at 3 Notch, or whatever it was called. And I think, you know, as Yolŋu people, he has an obligation and has known this ever since he was born, that these relationships have to be together. And Wukundwanabe would often say that one bark painting can't sit by itself, it has to sit with others. It has to sit with its family. And while we're sitting here, there's song lines and there's conversations crisscrossing above our heads from painting to painting. These works are talking to each other in a relationship of place. One represents one side of the river, which might be a certain moiety, and the other side of the river, and they talk to each other across those sacred waters. So Jambua has always been a missionary man. When he spearheaded the Sea Rights campaign, using bark paintings to prove to the High Court of Australia that the Yolŋu owned not only the land, but they owned the sea, and all the rights of the sea and the song lines and everything that sat within it. So Jambua has a history of doing this, and as you said, when Jambua tells you to do something, you do it. But I think what was really extraordinary for me was Jambua was asking us to join him. You know, you touched on it. He wasn't saying, hey, you guys go and curate a show, because you're curators. He said, oh, I'm going to do this thing, and I want you guys to come along. And that was a really beautiful moment for me. You know, he, even his painting that you're talking about, you know, he had a plan, he followed that plan the whole way through. And he won the National Indigenous Art Awards with this bark painting in 2019, and probably knew that it was going to end up here. But yeah, I think it was when he opened those drawers, you know, he really, he knew what he had to do on behalf of his ancestors and I think he also knew that it had to be shown in America. It was not something he was like, okay, let's repatriate these things, let's do this back in Australia. He saw the power of those works and his ancestors being on another country and talking to other nations, First Nations people, non-Indigenous people. He saw the power in doing that. And the Yolŋu have a history of acknowledging that moment and embracing that moment and giving themselves power.
That is an amazing way to see it. That's an amazing way to get us started. Now, we introduced in just those 2 starting points a whole bunch of concepts that we're going to pick out and tease out. And we'll get there. It might take 50,000 years, but we'll get there. But one of the things that you raised, and that was about the answer for one. And we've we've said this, the Arts Centre Pukalanga at Yirrkala. Dave, while we've got you here, can you tell us what Pukalanga is? What is an Arts Centre, and what do you do there?
Hi everyone. My name is David Wickens. That's my professional name. And I've had the fortunate job of working for Pukalanga in Yolŋu, an arts centre based in northeast Mađayin, which is the most northeastern tip of the Northern Territory. I just want to express to everyone that right now the team is very tired after a very long trip getting here. And whilst I know they'd love to be here, they have a very important thing to do, which is to go to Westfield and buy all the gifts for them entertainment. I'm not going to apologise for that, but I just wanted everyone to know it's been a long trip. So, this question is something that we have to answer a lot in Australia, because back home not everyone is familiar with the importance of art centres within communities, and I'm not familiar with how many there are across Australia. But as a truly unique thing, there are these establishments which are all owned by the community. They are usually not-for-profits, registered associations with boards of Indigenous people who help to govern and manage their own business. Pukalanga Yolŋu is a very large and successful art centre, community run. Has been established since 1975, 74, depending on what date you look at. It began through, again, self-determination from Yolŋu. The precipice for the art centre started with one artist in a tin shed by the beach who decided to start selling his wares, not through the religious mission system, but by himself on the shores where he lived, and into memory, sold lots of paintings to visitors, and actually sold tickets to local ceremony. It was then, at that time, that the community was gifted the hospital or the clinic that was run by the mission as a premise to run their art centre at that time, called Yirrkala Arts and Craft. And we are still known as the craft shop to all of the Yolŋu within the community, even though that brings haberdashery to mind and keeps us very humble. I'm not sure when the name was changed, but the name has a great meaning, which I like to reflect on, which is Pukalanga is the sun rays that touch your face as the sun rises from the east, as we are looking east, and these people are known as the sunrise people, or saltwater country. The art centre is like a hive of activity in so many different ways. It actually gave birth literally to artists before it was an art centre, as it has a maternity wing that ran off the front, which some of our artists helped people in this room to be born in. So it's quite a very sacred place. And actually recently, whilst we were extending the back shed, we discovered a huge deposit of white clay underneath the foundations, which is all of the white that you see in this room is a very sacred colour or pigment to use. So it's a really special place, and it's expanded over the years, and Kate has seen the development of Henry, and probably my assumption comes. It houses the Yolŋu Museum, so it's really a premise that people can come and experience in a very immersive way your history, your artistic practice, and meet people. And I encourage anyone who has the capacity to get to Australia to make the journey, which is quite easy for a remote community, to fly up to go Millennia and then take a 15-minute drive and come and see the art centre in Yirrkala. It has over 300 members, so more than 300 artists actively working, harvesting material that they find on or within the land. It also has a printmaking studio, one of the only remote limited edition printmaking studios in Australia. It has a digital wing which produces one of the films that we can see in this exhibition, and very large-scale contemporary immersive installations across Australia and the world. The Mulca project. It has an auditorium, called the Saltwater Auditorium. It's got a stage out in front in my front yard. I often see amazing bands, including Yirrkala and King Stingray and some of the huge bands that are coming out of that community. And I remember when I first started, Joseph Brady from the Mocha Project just said to me, it often feels like this place is the centre of the universe. And actually a week later, Prince Charles came to visit us. And I was like, oh my God, what have I got myself into? But as always, sitting here is a little bit confronting for me because part of my role is that the Yolŋu hire me, the Yolŋu hire us, because we act as a medium. We grow up around small business, or we have skills that aren't as easy to access for Yolŋu for many different reasons. A lot of it can come back to just being able to speak English when English is your fifth language, and understanding the economy and the economy around art and the sale of art and the provenance of art. And we're hired to be invisible as well. So me sitting here talking to you feels like it's part of my job, and I'm doing it for my bosses. So it's very much about self-determination. And this exhibition is just an extension of that. And once again, to reflect on Dumboa, he is really one of the most important people in the world, and especially in the world of Yolŋu art, because not that long ago he walked into the gallery and he looked at these beautiful bright pink paintings, or these works on metal, and all this innovation, all this new practices that I spoke about yesterday being some of the most exciting art movements in the world, and we very rarely see new art movements in what we call contemporary art. And he just had like his big belly laugh, like, whoo, whoo, whoo. I guess this is all my fault. I mean, I could speak for hours about this, so just...
Well, we'll come back. You are responsible for curating the entire what's termed Oceania, which is means only 1/3 of the planet. Right. So you're responsible for creating the art for 1/3 of the planet. But you've been out to Maɗayin, you've seen what a special place it is. What do you think makes these artists stand out in the world of stream art, but also in the world of local contemporary practice? We don't have another one.
Then I'll pick a couple for my I want to talk really, the words that come to mind immediately when you say that are power and agency. And I do look after this vast swathe of art from across Oceania. It includes the vast continent of Australia. When you work with a collection that kind of cuts through such a deep tranche of space and time, things start to rise up from the collection and distill into singular, kind of conceptual framework for the entire region. And so when I look at these works, the kind of networks of invisible ley lines that are kind of mapping across cosmological lines, that speak to relationships over space and time, is what I think about and see. And then that's reinforced, of course, by Yolŋu in their talking about these works, and we were privileged to hear them sing and express a lot of these deeply foundational ideas that guide their way of being in the world. Interestingly, those relationships, when you work with a collection like I do, and indeed we're all involved in this, we're kind of drawn into those lines in ways that we must be open to, because those relationships kind of guide us. And so I find myself, August 2019, with Henry and Cade and my son, who's also here, Talmini, in a truck, leaving the Bukulake, the art centre, but kind of going on a track to find Dumboa and stopping at all these very key ancestral sites on the way. And so that was a really, so I'm kind of inadvertently drawn into these relationships, and now, came down for the weekend here and have been, now I'm part of this family, or Yirrkala, we call it in Māori, and that is a very key, that kind of those reciprocal relations are so key, and that's really what's on display here, in fact. And you know, I might just speak to.
Yes.
Do you want me to? Yeah. So, as a woman working in this, it was really. I was delighted to be invited to speak, write actually a focused essay on this artist, Mađayin, and she for me is very innovative because her family are all, you know, displayed in these kind of ley lines that we're saying crisscrossing across this space, and so her mother, Mađayin, there is a fantastic pair of bark paintings on the other side of this wall. She is she's the eldest daughter of Jupa. Wonderful, yeah. That's wonderful. Yeah, her grandfather, yeah. Mađa's father. Yeah, Jupa. And then, yeah, so. No, that's fine. So what I love about this set, I mean, this is, you know, the only set, this kind of assemblage in this show. You can see these, this grid that she has been, you know, practicing over the course of a very prolific career, kind of lifted himself off the surface of the bark, and she kind of began to experiment with this tiling. And what she's doing is kind of reconfiguring Japu designs over time. So there are these concepts that are very familiar to me in other parts of the Pacific. Like, these are templates that are reinvested with meaning every time you paint them. So those, you know, underlying narratives, those ancestral narratives are really an anchor point for reinvesting with meaning. So it's in the very act of painting that knowledge is kind of reinscribed over time. So to me, they are a kind of materiality of time. And as David said about it's the kapan, that white clay, you know, the decision to use that was actually controversial within the community, and that had to be discussed because it is such a sacred, you know, that white clay pigment is such a key part of that. But there were important discussions within the community as to, you know, whether she would be able to use that. Yeah, you'll see if you look carefully up in the top there, masked under this gapan white pigment, the body of a shark, this bold graphic shark, Mana, the ancestral shark, which is a kind of anchor point for ancestral narratives for the Japu clan. So interesting stories that pertain to each and every one of these paintings. So, you know, we just scratch the surface, but really every time they would speak to these, there are kind of aspects of the stories that are revealed to us.
It's quite funny, sorry to have totally messed up your genealogy, but it's amazing that you can sit here and we've got Mađayin next to her grandfather, next to her paternal grandfather, opposite her maternal grandfather. So it's easy to get them mixed up. And in fact, I didn't get any sideline in this exhibition. You could probably see somebody who's related to somebody, to somebody, to somebody. And that's not in any way accidental. In fact, that was the entire rationale of the curators of this, the one of Jumbo Marawili. And when we were at Dartmouth at the Wood Museum of Art for the first installation, Jumbo laid out the works for this exhibition on a maquette, and it's two sort of overarching circles, sort of two arcs that hug each other as you walk through, which we've used this word relationships a lot, but it maps out a series of relationships. Hey, what are those two arcs?
I tell you, it was a lot of fun with a scale model of this made out of foam core and jumbo with tiny little bark paintings cut out, sticking them on the walls up in Dartmouth. It was a lot of fun. In fact, we were doing it just the other day for the Fralin in Charlottesville with the other guys. But these two arts, so when we talk about relationships in Yolŋu culture, we're talking about curatorial. Curatorial is the Yolŋu word for this relationships that we're talking about. So in that you have two moieties. You have Yirrkala and Dua. And those two moieties make up everything. So we're not just talking about people, we're talking about animals, we're talking about rivers, we're talking about the stars, we're talking about the moon, we're talking about everything that exists in Miwok country, in the world of the island of the Yolŋu, is part of this curatorial system. And even the relationship that the four of us have with Yolŋu is us being brought into that curatorial system. So this woman behind me is my sister, and she treats me in and brings me into that Dua moiety, and I sit on that side. So the opposite of me, my wife, has to be Yirrkala. And so these two systems, or these two moieties that sit together, house a series of clans within them. But without going too deep, Mr. Wannabe and Jambua are very aware of this. They live this in everything that they do, in everything that they touch. It has a relationship in everything that they hunt and they harvest. Even this material bark, Kareta, is related to the Marakulu clan of the Dua moiety. So it, in its own right, is a relationship to a person. It has an identity. It has a song line, the material itself. So these two arcs that we're talking about, in some ways, and I think it was Ishmael said the other day, it's like yin and yang. You know, there's a balance in this that has to exist. So that balance has to exist between those two moieties, and in the curation of this exhibition, Jambua and Walker made sure that that balance existed. There are many more complex lines in that curatorial system that exist, but effectively those two arms, Yirrkala and Dua, are what make up everything.
Maybe just tell people how they can walk, see that laid out in the exhibition.
Yeah, so behind me is Dua in this room, and we're looking across at Yirrkala here. So if you come up the stairs and you walk through this way, you'll be walking across through Yirrkala. And then you enter into that again in the other room, Yirrkala on one side, and then Dua brings you back around. So it would be impossible for us to assume that you guys wouldn't know how to walk around and represent the difference. But I think what's really important is the curation of this. When Henry and I printed out all the artworks, and we travelled across America looking at all these paintings in different collections, and we borrowed a lot of works out of institutions all over the country and Australia. And when we printed those pieces of paper out, you know, perhaps a curator might look at them in terms of a chronological order. But the Yolŋu don't see any tense in these works. There is no past, present, or future. It's the every when, it's all one and the same. These old paintings are telling the same story as the new commissions. And when Jambua started moving these pieces of paper around, he wasn't doing it in terms of aesthetics, he was doing it in terms of relationships. And those Yirrkala and Dua talking to each other, those family groups talking to each other. And that's what exists in this room. And that's what exists in every iteration of this exhibition, including the catalogue and how that's designed and put together. And I think that's a really extraordinary thing. There have been exhibitions across America and across the world of surveys of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander art. But this is a really concentrated focus on a particular language group of people in North East Arnhem, and this is their entire world and their entire relationship system here in written form. I mean, the pattern says this is text. This is endless encyclopedias of information that we're sitting amongst.
I just heard a question over here, which is, what is the bark? I think David, Mr. David, would be well situated to answer that question.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a material that I have to work with every day at the Art Centre, and we had a wonderful conversation yesterday in our summit where my staff member enacted his attempts and his first day on the job basically, to harvest this wonderful material, which which is sourced from the land. Now, I might just start with part of the reason why you'll paint on bark, in contemporary times as well as historical. But a statement that was made by the founding members of the Art Centre was, if you're going to paint the land, you have to use the land. So that is harvesting natural material from the land. That is finding the rocks on the ground in historical times, using things like orchid juice and fats and bloods to fix the pigment. This relates to both painting on bark and rock art. But it's a wonderful material that is very tough, and is the external skin which wraps itself around the Kadeka tree or the stringy bark tree or Eucalyptus tetragonta, which we are very fortunate to be living in a place in northeast Arnhem Land with vast, vast forests of beautiful grey stringy bark trees. There is little topsoil in these areas, and fire sweeps through, seasonal fires sweep through every year, and they're lit by Yolŋu as a way of looking after the land and cleaning up the land. And so the surface of this material is there to protect the tree. But it also becomes a wonderful material for many different uses, pre-bark painting. It's an architectural material, as Yolŋu would build bark shelters, a wonderful elevated house with a pitched roof using bark as a material to keep the rain off during the wet season, and a floor of stringy bark and paper bark to sleep on, whilst you have a lovely smoky fire underneath you to keep the mosquitoes down. It also was used as plates. There's all sorts of amazing to build canoes, and so pieces of this material, part of the process of harvesting bark is that it's a seasonal thing, which in a way keeps it quite sustainable as well. And this material is harvested during the wet season when the bark is very supple on the tree, and you would, as our staff member described in more contemporary times, drive your troop carrier, Toyota big Land Cruiser into the bush and get as close to that tree as possible, stand on the roof of that car and cut as high as possible in order to harvest as much bark from that tree as possible. After you've identified that it's straight and large, you cut at the top, and you cut at the bottom, and then you strip a section down the middle, and you peel the bark off the tree. It makes this wonderful sound as it comes off. In more traditional, classical times, you would then start a fire on the ground under that tree in order to heat up this material, to start to relax the waxes and resins that exist in this material. You heat it up, you cook it on the fire, both sides. There's many different ways that this method goes throughout northeast Arnhem Land into west Arnhem Land, over to the Maḍayin regions. There's so many different ways to do this. You would then lay it flat and hopefully have some air flowing underneath it for a period of 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month, in order for it to dry out completely and become this hard surface, which is really quite a tough material. And then you begin painting. You have to bring your other materials together.
I have a quick question. How long does it take apart to replenish?
Say goodbye to Maya, and thank you very much.
So Maya has to leave us, so we should just give Maya a quick clap and thank her. And then we just get stuck with the 3 of us. And then I will throw it over for questions. But before I do that, I just want to touch on one thing. This is a question that often gets asked. And David just then talked about the pre-bark painting period. These would be used for making canoes or making bark huts, and not necessarily the kinds of paintings that we see in this exhibition. But, as Mr. Wannabe says in the introduction, the designs are so much older. The designs go back many, many thousands of years. And those designs, which are known as the Maḍayin, the sacred clan designs, would have been painted on the chests of young boys, and they still are. Every time there's an initiation ceremony, these designs would be painted on the chests of men, and they would be sung over. Some of the meanings of those designs would be explained to them. But what becomes very radical in the 1930s amongst this group of artists in Northeast Arnhem is that a number of senior men begin to transfer those designs from the body onto the bark. And so if you look at this painting here by a wonderful Maḍayin behind us, I'm going to try my contact. No, I'm not. This painting by Munduku is a really classic example because you will see that the bulk of the painting is taken up by a square which will be painted on the torso of a young man. But above we see the straps of the shoulders and the bars that will be painted on his thighs. You see, and so you can see that that's a transferable. And it doesn't take much from that point to see this explosion of creativity where artists begin to fill up the canvas with these designs and begin to think, like Malfoy does over here, about ways of incorporating the narrative elements in order to explain the meanings of the designs to outsiders, or to perhaps conceal some elements of those designs from outsiders. Now, just before we get on to this, I'm going to just give you the kind of quick rush through Yolŋu aesthetics. Why are these designs so important? Why are they sacred designs? I think my favourite ever painting produced, a brilliant one for explaining that is this painting here by Maḍayin. Alright, what have we got here? The shark. Yeah, no, mine gave it away. It's the shark wall. We have shark week, we have shark wall. Okay, so this is a shark named Yolŋu, swimming around, minding his own business, so they score Yirrkala. He gets speared. You can see he's been speared 4 times here. He gets speared by the ancestral honey man, Maḍayin, sort of a trickster spirit, Maḍayin. He gets speared. Now, rather than turning around and swimming out to sea, he burrows into the land. In his death throes, he's creating the river system, the Yirrkala river system. Right? You've ever been to Florida, you know, you see those winding rivers in the tropics. He's creating that river system, and his body is breaking up. His skin is flailing up and becoming the casuarina trees along the banks, and his fins become rocks and bays. And all the time, all the while that's happening, his body is emanating these designs. His body is emanating these designs. So for a young boy to have those designs painted on his chest, like they would have been meant like that, it's not like some fancy dress, right? It's not like Halloween, putting makeup on to disguise yourself. But it's actually revealing your inner essence. As I said, Jambo would say, he is the crocodile. The boy that has this painted on his body is not disguising himself. He's revealing his inner essence as a sharp person. He's doing that by manifesting the designs that were laid out in the country the very moment that it was created. And so as we walk around, you're looking at relationships, you're looking at places, you're looking at ancestral narratives, and you're looking at this sort of manifestation of ancestral power. Right? So when Jambo talks about sharing, putting the laws at the same level, about sending that power over to America, that's what they're giving you here. Right? This is a big show of power. Okay, shall we throw it to questions?
Yes.
Eve.
Yes, my question is about materials. Because I grew up in Uganda, where there's a tradition of using bark, but as bark cloth. And I wanted to know if anybody could talk about the differences, maybe in the process of preparing that bark for painting. And then, just to kind of dovetail off another question that was asked, are there any pieces that cannot be next to each other? We talk about relationships, but are there any ones that absolutely must be? Because I eavesdropped on the computer yesterday on the side. So I'll leave it at that. And also, she was asking about the sustainability of the trees. Do the trees survive removal of the forest?
No,
There's
but
not,
it's the biggest art supply store in the world. Really, it's huge. And
to expand on that, the trees dying. The trees don't die to the world. They become kindling for firewood. They become hollow homes for animals, and they also fertilize the ground. The ground is very heavily rained upon every year, where all the topsoil is washed away. So I think, whilst the tree dies, and there are a lot of vast area, I don't know what the square mileage of our land is, but it's probably a state in itself. It doesn't die in the same way that we might get really upset about. And it's a question that we get asked all the time. I mean, what is so exciting and important to remember about the law that is there, that if you're going to paint the land, you have to use the land. If we were going to buy rolls of canvas, you think about the carbon footprint of buying materials that are mass produced in China that pollute the planet with all sorts of other things, that actually then you realise that the sustainability of this material is almost carbon neutral. So it's just that if you ever want to buy a bar paint, that's good. It's good for the
and
planet.
actually CSIRO did do an environmental study, and they decided that in fact the stringy bark forests were in no danger from a few bark paintings. And in actual fact,
It's a tree that's all over Australia.
that's right. I don't think any of us can really answer that clock question, because it's a different tree, and it's Yolŋu have uses for every single plant. And Morgan Rapunda's painting over here is a good example, and she's painted, in that painting alone, is 25 different edible plants. Plants that are used for medicine, plants that are used for eye drops, plants that are used for eating. And every part of it, every part of the land has something to give. There is a paperbark tree that artists will use for swaddling children, but they'll also use it for wrapping meats that can be cooked on the fire. So, it's very particular to the environment. It's a response to that environment. They don't have bark cloth because they don't have that particular type of bark, but there's plenty of ingenuity on show here there's more ingenuity on show here than we can touch on in an hour. So.
In terms of the evaluation, things that can't be done?
Oh,
There is an avoidance relationship that sits within the curatorial system. So you will avoid your kuni or your poison cousin, and you won't go in the same car as them, you won't travel in the same, be in the same room. I mean, even Dave has navigated the seating arrangement on the Qantas flight on the way home, so that certain people aren't sitting next to certain people. And we had to do that a couple of times yesterday at the symposium. We had to sort of change it up a little bit because a person can't sit next to another person. I mean, it's not an avoidance thing out of spite or anything. There is still a relationship there. There is still a connection and an obligation between those two people and those two bark paintings, those two clans, to steward each other and be with each other. It's not bad. It just keeps that balance of that door more and those two pointings. It keeps that system in place.
Yeah, and I sometimes think that curatorial is such a complicated thing that even as 5 years in Yirrkala and before that in the West, I can't grasp completely, because there's some elements of family that we've established that is quite narrow in comparison, and that I wonder, avoidance relationships, like I know that a brother and sister can't talk to each other at a certain, beyond a certain age, and the poison relationship, but I've heard them be able to talk to each other through other family members. And I often think that what it does is create more community. You need to talk to someone else who can talk to your sister to check if she's okay. By doing that, you create this great sense of mental health, because you're talking to someone else as well, to ask them to go look after your sister. And she knows and can feel that love from you. And I would say that it is a very loving relationship, and that we might view it as like, well, then, you know, it's very complicated and they don't have any friends. Well, no one's friends in North East Ireland because they're all family, and it's one big family. And yeah, they have little quarrels and tiffs, but ultimately, a lot of curatorial is about love for each other and love for the land. And speaking for the land, one of my favourite violins with it is an extension of the land by being the tongue of the land, the voice of the land. So, yeah, curatorial, whilst it's really complicated, I'm always trying to analyse it from my simple Western brain. Be like, why can't you talk to your sister? And it's great, and then someone tells me that they can. They just have to talk to this person, and that starts 6 other conversations, and then all of a sudden the whole team is coming together to look after your sister. And from afar you smile at each other and go, thanks, brother.
I do think that there's one way, like one of the things that's lovely about the curation of this exhibition is that, you know, you can follow those relationships if you look really, really carefully. You know, so for instance, what I would tell my students is, you know, look at these 5 works along the back wall, which are all from the same family, and you'll be able to see there are the same strings of diamonds in all 4 of them. They might look slightly different, but they're all there. Now, why has Jumbo put them in relation to that wall over there? Well, that wall all has a different kind of diamond, right? They're similar but different because they relate to one place, Yirrkala, the Yolŋu clan state. These relate to Yirrkala and the Maḍayin clan state, but they're closely related. Right? So what I would encourage you to do as you're walking through is to really tune your eye into thinking about, you know, what makes these paintings similar, what makes them different, what makes them alike to the ones that have been set aside. Because the curators have been, you know, Mr. Wonderby used to say all the time, your curator is about making a clear picture. Right? That was the thing. He wasn't trying to obfuscate. He was really deliberately trying to show you that these patterns are constant. I think it's as an art historian, I look at this wall behind me and I think, oh my gosh, look how much they innovated from 1942 to 1996 to 2019. And Morgan would say, that's looking at it totally wrong. All the same, right? They're all the same. He would say they're just same but different. And so I think that, you know, a lot of people get very concerned, oh, I'm not going to understand this, but actually just know that this has been laid out by the curator that they're trying to show you. And you just have to, what did Ishmael say at the summit? You have to go in with your heart and your eyes are really full. So,
is there a common meaning to these things?
yeah, it's the meaning of life. I mean, this is the entire.
Would you say that this particular art cloth would say the same thing in a different tribe, in a different time, in a different place? Does it always say the same thing, or are there different messages for each?
Each work, I mean, whilst in some areas it can be the same story, each work would come with a 3 or 4 page essay or a book if you really wanted to expand on it. So looking at a lot of narratives, and Henry touched on it with this painting here, being about the creation of landscape or the body of water or a story. A lot of those stories would be passed down as a way to teach children about the natural environment. You know, it's there. I think you can also view a lot of these as, if you use your contemporary lens, as self-portraits. You know, because they really are identifying the deep meaning of who a person is as their essence. So self-portraits is quite a simplistic way of looking at it because it's really a portrait of the landscape or the water. And so if you had a Yolŋu artist from each clan here, whilst it would be challenging for them to explain, you know, put in English, they could tell you the narrative of what's going on. There's a lot of stories about these paintings.
It's a very dynamic culture and very fluid and changing. Although these patterns have been laid by the ancestors, they are the same. We have an example in this exhibition of the work out of the 33 commissions that no one had really seen before, Wagabi Marika's painting, which is in the other room. Now, that in its own right is such a dynamic thing to do, is to reveal a new painting to us and share it with us.
And there's still hidden, there's still more that we don't know that could come out in the future.
How many clans are there? And of those that are in Australia, what percentage are represented in
There's 13 clans in here, but this is just one particular area. I mean, how many language groups are there in Australia?
I mean, there's a very famous map that you'll see in 1770. There was around about 300 languages spoken across Australia, so 300 quite distinctive cultural groups. Today, though, and I find this amazing to contemplate, there are still 50 languages in Australia that are spoken as the first language of children, 50 indigenous languages. And in fact, one of the things that Francis Morphy notes in catalogue is that whilst around the world we often talk about endangered languages, there are in fact more Yolŋu speakers today than at any point in history. Right? So it's a very strong language, it's a very strong culture. How many clans were there when Captain Cook arrived? I mean, there would have, what's 300 times 30 or something like that. There would have been a great many. And this group of people are very lucky their clan system, their Gurudju system has stayed very strong, but even they would not be impermeable to the effects of colonisation. And there is in fact one clan represented in this show, the Yolŋu clan, who went, I don't want to say the clan, the last member of the clan died in 1996-ish, right? So the last member of the clan died, but that doesn't mean that the clan's lands have died. That doesn't mean that those songs have died. That doesn't mean those designs have died. We have the Yolŋu clan designs here. And why do we have that? Because their relatives are here, and they are caring for those designs, and they are continuing to paint those designs. And then one day, perhaps those lands will be alive again.
Yeah, and other family members are able to bring to life paintings or stories or ceremony through the other responsibility of being a Yolŋu or being a caretaker for the opposite clan, or even through their mother's side. A lot of people paint directly from their father's teachings, but Western being a very good example of that. He's a dual man who has enough authority to paint literature paintings and the paintings of his wife and his mother. Through Yirrkala, that beautiful work over there which is shimmering on the wall, the sand that is lifted from the beach at a particular place. So would be someone very special who can use the land to its fullest, applying the designs of that area and thinking about using the material itself from that place to veer off a little bit.
One last question.
I've been looking at this large painting behind you, and is there a template for laying it out? Or is the installation person allowed to have a little freedom?
No, there is a template to it. And actually, if you head to our YouTube page, you can watch it being installed. It's a very enjoyable 3 minutes.
I met her last night at dinner. She said it took 6 hours. 6 days.
All right, I think you can do one more question though. That's an easy one to answer. One last one.
These paintings were on a land. Are there bark paintings done in other parts of Australia?
There is. This tree, the eucalyptus tetragonta, grows, and then, the stringy bark grows alone, but some different varieties of stringy bark. But this one in particular grows in the northern part of Australia, so that sort of belt spreads across from Arnhem Land through West Daly, even little bits of the northern Kimberley, northern Western Australia. So, yes, I mean, the philosophy and the commitment that David was talking about before, if you paint the land, you use the land, has been the success of this particular region and this art centre continuing that practice. Other places have, for whatever reason, been introduced to canvas, and so their practice has maybe dropped off, but we've seen in recent times that's really accelerating and coming back up. People are really returning to those materials all the way across to West Daly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a historian, so I don't know the actual numbers, but there are collections of bark paintings from southern, southeastern Australia, from the Sydney Cove region. So I dare say it's a material that is spread across the land, and that all Indigenous people are very ingenious in finding and harvesting these materials, and that, you know, places as far south as Tasmania, which I've visited personally and seen giant stringbark trees and dreamed of the scale of bark paintings whilst they're protected.
I think we need to kind of wrap it up, but we'll hang around for a little bit and wonder and answer any questions individually for a little bit. But I would just like to thank David Wickens and Kate McDonald.